Boom, here we are.
Yeah, I was just reading those questions off the Instagram account.
Yeah, Broken City Percussion Instagram.
Yeah.
Why don't we start there?
Yeah, let's go right to it.
Let's jump right in, man. By the way, it's good to be back again. This is we kind of launched with our buddy Corey, and now we're here in Julian with Mike, and we're gonna dive right into some questions here. All right, you ready for this, man?
I'm ready. Yeah.
From @AJames39, what is the hardest part about creating an indoor percussion show?
Everything matters. That's too easy of an answer.
Next question.
Let me contextualize it. The hardest part, I think, if I can look back historically at the biggest hurdle that we've had as an organization, in the context of Broken City, it's surprisingly, where do we park the truck?
Whoa.
Where does the truck live? It can be difficult to find a rehearsal site. I think the actual hard part is what rehearsal site allows you to leave the truck there indefinitely.
So it's logistics. It's not creative.
Yeah, 365 days a year, the semi is sitting on someone's campus somewhere. The alternative is having to move the truck every weekend during the season, which can be guesstimating roughly $400 every time you move the truck. Boom,
Yeah.
$400, and that can quickly deplete the resources of the organization. So I know that was one thing that was, I think, a turning point for Broken City, is when we finally found that location. Like, all right, our truck lives here. We have a great relationship with our rehearsal site.
Okay, so he's saying creating an indoor show, but your
True.
mind went right to
I did.
It's like you can't
Well,
be
'cause
calm enough to create
right.
unless like the logistics.
Yeah, and I think
handled.
maybe part of it too is I wasn't a good listener, and I'm not looking at the question. I immediately I grabbed on to
Just the
to
indoor
the
thing.
difficult or the hardest part. I grabbed onto that, and I know that's one of those special sore spots, or at least it used to be.
Well, I mean, if somebody asked me what's the hardest part about songwriting, I might go to like carving out time in my life so that I can just care about songwriting in my life, because I know that if stress levels rise or I'm worried about something, unless I'm writing a song about that, which is really rare, like I don't feel like anxiety is art provoking, but depression is, or melancholy. It's interesting. Because at one point somebody said, like, I'm dealing with so much anxiety, and I'm like, maybe you can write about it. And this is before I had really dealt with that before. And this person was like, there's no way I can create when I'm anxious. And then I had learned, like, oh yeah, when you're feeling like that anxiety or some sort of intense worry about how your life's going to turn out, or if you're going to pay the bills or whatever it might be, like, it shuts down creativity. I think logistics are one of those things. Like, if you're like in the back of your head, like, how are we going to even pull this off? Are the drums going to get there? Like, how can you create?
Yep.
So let's
go
to the next
I will
part.
actually answer the question this time.
Yeah.
Just a quick point though. I think with, at least on the marching arts side of things, the anxiety perhaps that can equate with deadlines. And for some reason,
You've talked a lot about deadlines.
Yeah, deadlines seem to work well for our side of the art form.
Your side meaning like
the marching arts.
Okay.
The marching arts. I think at least most people I talk to that do what I do, deadlines can be extremely motivating, and sometimes maybe reluctantly we do our best work when we know, man, that rehearsal is coming whether I like it or not, and there's got to be something there.
Yeah, so you're a crammer.
Yeah, I try not to be. but I don't think I
But do you
approach
flourish? Like, does that pressure sort of like boost you? It's now or never.
it.
I mean, if you had 5 years to write the next Broken City show, would that be a good idea?
No,
So yes,
no,
yeah,
no, and I think perhaps I'm being. I think most of the cramming are the nuts and bolts. Like, you're not cramming a concept. You're not cramming a vision of what you're trying to say. You're cramming the nuts and bolts to make sure
yeah.
that there's functionality on the weekend.
This concept hit me just now of like artists and restrictions or parameters or limitations, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Whereas, like if you tell a painter, okay, paint and the world is your canvas, it's like a little bit paralyzing as opposed to, here you go, 8x10 frame, paint. And time is like that, I think, for artists. Give them infinite amount of time, they'll waste it all, or they'll have a hard time really knowing what's up. But like I've noticed in the past that I'm pretty inspired by, like, if I'm feeling a general sense of inspiration at that time in my life, if I have to be somewhere at 4 and it's like 1, sometimes I'll just be like, I'm gonna freaking write and record the drums and guitars on a song, and it gives me the sense of like, can I do it in time? Like rise to the occasion kind of thing, like little imposed deadlines.
Maybe
Help
that's the answer to that question. Is the hardest part about coming up with a show design is creating the initial parameters.
There you go. The concept.
It's not even necessarily the concept. It's just because sometimes the parameters happen before the concept. Like if I'm inspired by, I'll bleed into another question that I peeked at. I cheated about the 2 drum sets, right?
Yeah.
So if I have this aesthetic in mind, like, okay, no matter what, we're going with 2 drum sets, and we're gonna write and create within those parameters, which is pretty extreme. It affects the battery book a lot. Knowing, like, if I'm writing the battery book, I have to know that there's 2 drum sets. I have to leave space for that, opportunities and just little windows. And this isn't just instrumentation. These are human beings that are going to be spending their time with us. So they have to have something to do, and they have to feel like it was worthwhile. And so to make it that much of a worthwhile event for them,
Mm-hmm.
it definitely has to be thought about way ahead of time. And that is the hardest part, I think, is what is that initial parameter that starts to shape what the show becomes? Because eventually, that show became Cage, but we didn't know it was Cage yet.
Yeah.
But it started to happen slowly with
And also, man, like,
parameters.
I guess it's going on 4 years now that we've been working pretty tightly on this stuff, or maybe it's 3, 4. I've noticed that one of in the planning stages, the conceptual design stage, whatever it is, I feel like there's at least a few times every year where you impose parameters, and you did one today. I won't give away what it was, but you just said, this is going to be really difficult, but this has to be real. When we do this certain thing, it's got to be like physically happening, meaning like the physics of what we're doing can't be faked.
Right.
And I was like, oh, and it just makes it harder. But I think you're basically setting the tone of like, this has to be legitimately happening. We're not going to fake this.
I think that's a parameter of the organization and not just any particular show.
Well, then let me jump to a different question, because this question is totally in that zone. Where you at? It is. Where's that question? It was about the uniforms.
I didn't see that one. That's not one I cheated with.
Yeah, so it said like why I can't find it right now, but sorry whoever asked that. It must be on a different page, or different Instagram account. But it said like, why are you using the same design for the uniforms? Even though the Bloom trilogy is over, you're continuing to use.
Yeah, and that uniform didn't even arrive. I assume they're talking about the one we're using currently. That didn't arrive until Cage, and it was one of those parameters I thought that would be special. That, as far as I know, no one else has done that. Where we use the same uniform costume every year.
It's a double whammy too, right? It's like, oh, one less thing, but it's also like, no, this is a hallmark of what we do.
Well, the interesting thing is that it actually becomes pretty challenging to take the same costume and how do we give it new life every year, based on the textures and the color palette and the contrast. Like, meaning if there was a patch of some light colored material with no sheen, and then it was adjacent to a darker patch with high sheen, not just changing the color and changing the texture, but also changing the contrast, completely changes the look of the costume. That's something we've been toying around with the last couple of years.
Yeah, in a way, I mean, this might be reaching, but you've basically decided the uniform is a series of frames. So it's like,
right,
you're going to deal with those frames and make it new every year. But that's like sort of like one of the things that doesn't change. I know there's a lot of stuff like that when I go from album to album. It's like, there's just like little subjective things that might seem subjective, but to me, they're not. They're just like, no, like, I was actually talking about this with Corey and just saying, like, I don't feel like I have a finished album until I feel like I've gone through pretty much every major emotion in that period of my life. So, like, something that I'm angry about, something that I'm frustrated about, something that I'm thinking about that's metaphysical or spiritual, something that's very much of the moment, something that's very much of my life. And there's some kind of like little potpourri kind of recipe or something where, like, if I haven't hit all those things, I don't really feel like I have an album. I don't really feel like I have a reason to group these songs together. So then an album ends up being like a real snapshot of like, here I was during this period going through all the stuff that I go through.
Right.
It's my man cycle. And then it culminates in the birth of an album.
Right.
Okay, next question.
Yeah.
Keep it moving right along here. Mallet percussion composition tips.
Mallet percussion. We need K-Shaw.
Where's
here.
K-Shaw?
I could give him some tips, though.
Yeah, now's your chance, dude. Why don't you give K-Shaw some tips?
Actually, I can speak on this a little bit. As far as, like, harmonic structure and the journey that Kevin creates with our front ensemble book, I can't comment too much on that. He's the expert there. However, there's some things that we've done in the past. We don't always do it. It's not necessarily a formula, but it's a tool, tactic that we can use. Is allowing the battery percussion to be written first, and then taking the architecture, whatever rhythms are happening, whatever complexity is happening in the battery, shaping the front ensemble mallet book off that, rather than putting it all on the front ensemble composer to write this completed, finished product.
I didn't know that. So how often does that happen? You like literally turn in a bunch of battery stuff and he writes to it?
It depends. There's been some years where I have this theme that I want to do, and rather than try to express it to him and hope for the best, I'll write first. So I'll create a motif, I'll leave space where I want space, and then I'm thinking visually too, so I know it needs to happen on the floor when all this stuff is going on. And then he'll take that and he'll use that as his architecture, so to speak.
That's crazy. I'm like so in the dark. Top. That's like a surprise to me.
Yeah,
and that reminds me of, like, the songwriting question you always get. Is it like lyrics first or music, or melodies or music? And like,
It's
I would never have
always
guessed that
different. It's
that's the
always
way.
different. Yeah.
So it's always different, but you kind of prefer to do it that way. So you're
I don't think
free.
I have any preference. I think it's
But do you feel a little bit boxed in if he gives you a bunch of music and you're like, oh, I have to write to this?
no, because this isn't too groundbreaking. I think this is fairly common where the front ensemble might be written in completion, but it's somewhat in draft mode. Then the battery guy takes it, does what he wants to do, and there's some compromises that are made to anything that articulates in the front ensemble. So not like a string patch in the synths or anything like that, but you're talking about a xylophone or marimba.
Yeah, really
you
strong.
You might have
transient.
a triplet roll passage happening with the battery where previously written in the marimba book, you might have some 16th notes. You might want to clean that up. You might want to homogenize the rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you want texture and
Chaos for a second.
yeah,
Perceived
if that's a color that you're looking for, that kind of opaque, rhythmic texture, then maybe you leave it. But we always kind of revisit, and I might circle problem areas like, hey, I decided to do this quarter note triplet motif here, and you have some eighth notes, so let's clean that up. Because in the space of an arena or a gym,
Yeah.
it's not too forgiving with complex textures.
Yeah, you have all that reverb to deal with.
Right. So you kind of, if what you're trying to say is supposed to be articulate and sharp, you probably want to homogenize the rhythms. Yeah.
So here's a question for you that's a little less conceptual, more specific. Like, do you have any sort of rules that apply to, like, xylophone versus marimba, or things that you're like, I hate when like your personal like hates and loves for what those instruments should and shouldn't do, based completely on your subjective, like, just be super opinionated. All right, if somebody, let's say K-Shaw fell off a cliff and died on impact. Wait, no, that's not good. Let's say K-Shaw went on a vacation.
Let's not say.
Anyway, so like somebody new came in and they did like like the thing you hate for like xylophones, like let's say hard mallets on a very staccato instrument. What would be that thing that you're like, no, that's not for me? And don't be afraid to offend anybody.
When I think about just front ensembles in general,
but specifically,
yeah,
okay.
So I can't say in general.
Yeah.
Well, I would say it doesn't relate to mallets. I'd say it relates to more of the auxiliary accents, non-melodic percussion. Can be, if not done right, can be very disruptive to a complex battery phrase.
So first thing that comes to mind of it being done
Well,
wrong.
for instance, like if you've got some snare passage happening, and then all of a sudden the concert snare comes in, if there's an extreme exposure to error, given the textures are pretty similar, as far as they're both snare drums, different types of snare drums, but it would have to be so perfect to really communicate whatever that idea is, which can be done and it can be very cool, but I think it should be done on purpose. I think if there's an intent of, hey, I'm going to deliberately put this concert snare part on top of the marching snare part, and it's going to create this cool, stereophonic sound, whatever that event happens to be, then that's usually fine because there's no surprises. It's like, I know it's coming and it's deliberately written. It's when there's
and you're just saying that that's more likely to get screwed up just because the front to back.
Yeah, I just like there's some more generic approaches, like, oh, snare drums are playing concert snare, or the bass drums have this big impact coming up, so I'm going to echo that bass rhythm in the concert bass or the low toms in the pit.
You avoid that.
I would prefer to avoid it.
Okay.
Unless, again, this is all contextual, unless it's deliberate, like, hey, let's do this, and it's talked about.
But in general, you like a little bit of a separation between church and state.
I would hope that every element of the percussion, front ensemble or battery, is um,
Like special.
is speaking a certain way because of the intent. Like we meant it to sound like that, and happy accidents are cool, but
Yeah, I recall. No, sorry to interrupt, but I recall like, what's it called in Italian? Tutti. But like when a whole band plays, like when the bass, like in a rock band, it's like a riff thing. It's like everybody's playing the same thing. That can either be stupid or awesome. But if that's like kind of your go-to thing, is for everybody to like, especially if it's like the vocal and the guitar, it's like, I keep doing this thing where I'm going back to like my world versus the indoor percussion world, but like it's pretty rare that I'll like decide, okay, the guitar is going to play exactly what I'm singing.
I think I love what you said when you said the go-to. The go-to is what I have a problem with. I don't have a problem. I don't have any sort of like black and white rules regarding
You just don't
voicing.
Want a predetermined like.
Yeah, if someone has an idea, like, hey, I have this cool idea. What if the bass drums and the low toms or surdos in the front ensemble are mimicking, or they're playing off each other, and we're doing this kind of low end thing. That's like it's meant to be this way. I love stuff like that because it's weird, and as long as we know it's coming, it's the go to stuff. Like, oh, the bass drums went boom, 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 crash. So the concert bass goes boom, 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 crash. It's like,
right.
How about the concert bass waits?
At least skips one or something.
Yeah, let's skip the first three.
Yeah, and I
so
guess
you know where the tempo is.
Yeah, and I guess
and
this is
the last one.
This is what's behind the basic concept of counterpoint. It's like counterpoint is interesting. If things are just kind of locked up, it's just less interesting. I think that's why maybe riff rock is like kind of polarizing. You either kind of love it or you hate it, or it gets old, or it's easy for it to get old. If you have a band that's just, like for example, like Rage Against the Machine became Audioslave, and if you hear too many of those pentatonic things where the whole band's going like bam bam boo doo doo bam bam boo doo 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 bam doo doo doo, you're like, okay, the melody better be good, and then the next song is like bam bam boo doo doo bam 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 bam, and you're like, all right, dude, somebody play something different.
Wait, are you criticizing the Rage Against the Machine? Can you do that? Is that legal?
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
I love a lot of their stuff, but yeah.
However.
And actually, I'm a bigger fan of some of the Audioslave stuff because I think Chris Cornell threw a wrench in that. And a lot of times you could hear like, oh, Chris wrote the bridge, or that's a new take on singing over those kind of riffs. And you could feel the juxtaposition coming in. And it was like, that's what made that band refreshing. Rest in peace, Chris.
Yes.
All right. Next question.
Yeah. Just one clarification. That the go-to thing is not something I experience a lot in writing with the people that I write with. It's historically speaking and just learning along the way. It's one of those things that can get annoying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not happening at the Broken City level, for sure.
Right. Okay. Let's see. What do you guys as an organization look for in snare drummers? That's at MJG13. Ask that question.
I would think that my answer would apply to any instrument.
Really? Even if they walked in and said, I'm going to audition and I'm playing matched grip and I don't know how to play traditional?
Oh, well, okay.
That's dumb.
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
obvious.
I'm an idiot. Yeah, we look for specifically in snare drummers, though, like that would be different from tenors or
I don't know if I can say something that would be different than it's musicianship, awareness. I actually I have this.
What about touch? If somebody came in and they were playing, like for example, like really into the drum and like low and kind of tight.
So you're hitting on a lot of, like, this whole thing could just rabbit hole in any direction. So I think maybe the way I could answer the question that would be helpful is that we'll go to the Bruce Lee, the go-to Bruce Lee, and
The
that
1-inch punch.
the style is there is no style.
Oh, okay.
And I know you're a huge MMA, like UFC
Mm-hmm.
fan, and I actually bring that up sometimes in auditions that we found out real quick that what the superior form is. It didn't take too long to realize that, karate, taekwondo, kung fu, nope, it's the grapplers.
Yeah.
If you don't have some sort of grappling training, the Roman Greco or jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
if you don't have that training, you are simply like null and void in a human-to-human conflict.
Yeah, you better get lucky with your
Right.
mashups. But yeah.
So I think snare drumming
Mm-hmm.
can be the same way, that if you want a particular sound, or there's a particular rhythm or combinations of rhythms, sticking, I mean, there's so many variables that it's what technique did I need to use to achieve the thing I wanted to achieve? Well, then that's the technique.
Right.
So it's not the other way around, which is sort of how I was taught back in high school. That here's the technique, here's how we play, and then here's all the things we can play using this technique. Rather than let's play everything,
Right.
and let's not have a technique. Let's just do whatever is required of us to play that thing that we want to play. And if I need to let go of the stick to play that thing, I'm letting go of the stick.
So I would say then, if I'm going to translate for the question's sake, like that you want somebody who's malleable and who believes
Right.
in that philosophy.
Well, because you mentioned, I went this direction because you said, they come in and they're hitting the snare drum really hard, and it's okay. Sometimes that's what we want. And
So would you-
sometimes that's not what we want.
Would you immediately say like, hey, give me the opposite, play like this? And if they can't do it, is that sort of like, I'm talking about auditions here. Like, would it be like, oh shoot, that's a person who can't keep up with the idea of playing really different? It's like somebody who came in and all they knew was kung fu, and it was be like, you go back and learn wrestling and jiu-jitsu and then see me in a year, or
Yeah,
or 10 years.
Well, I think it's well, first of all, the warm up packet, I would like to believe, has enough
Built in.
twists and turns in it to where it's going to expose somebody's lack of vocabulary or ability to adjust technique to achieve certain rhythms, certain sounds. And sometimes not all of the interpretation is on paper. It has to be taught at some point, because you can only get so much information off the paper.
Right. But that is pretty cool. I mean, if MJG 13 to get the audition packet and look at it and really like know that
Yeah.
was very deliberate, it's kind of helpful, right?
Most of that stuff is on YouTube anyway. So I mean, it's very rare that somebody comes into an audition,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know what's going on.
Hmm.
Like, all those exercises are on YouTube within 6 months of their inception, and most of those exercises are several years old anyway. So there's plenty of examples of.
Sounds like you need to update it, man. Just kidding. I got a cramp in my foot just now, and it was like almost podcast ending. That was really weird. You got any potassium on you? Okay. Next question. That was scary. What inspires you guys to create abstract shows versus shows that are straight to the point? This is at Cargo Toodleys.
I love the phrase like on the nose, and
Off the nose. Yeah.
it's off the nose for sure. A friend of mine, Tommy Keenum, uses that phrase like so wisely and so appropriately, and it's when you're completely on the nose with something. Well, maybe I should clarify this, or qualify it. This is for me personally, and I can somewhat speak for Kevin. I don't know how to do on the nose. it's sort of like comedy, like delivering a joke, getting the timing right. I could tell you a story, and then at the end, I'm going to say, well, I guess you had to be there. And I feel like on the nose programming is that for me. It's not a bad thing. I think we need that. There's a lot of groups out there that are very on the nose, and they do it well, and they're rewarded for it. I can't do it, and we don't need a copycat. We don't need another group that sounds like some other group. So
Can you not do it because it's just not you? Or can you not do it because when you start to do it, you just, something in you goes, no.
I think it's a combination of ability and also like the lack of ability to do on the nose. I think that takes a certain type of like personality, certain sense of confidence and charisma with that sort of thing that I tend not to have. I think
well, it's represented in your personality. I've known you a long time, and I think even in asking you these questions, like you really tend to go to this conceptual. Like you like to create a slightly more abstract world in which to work in so that you're not on the nose, you know, like you're not just answering a question with a specific thing. You kind of like to play in the abstract, and I really relate to that too. And in my career, I've had to do a lot of on the nose stuff, and it's like there's a little feeling in my stomach when I do it. Like there's some kind of, I don't know if it's like it's that sellout muscle starts to contract, or it's something like, oh man, this could be so much more layered. And I think for me, it's a deep belief that when you're not on the nose, you're creating layers that reveal themselves with further listens. And I think that's like, there's a depth to that.
I think it's also a perceived depth, even if the depth isn't built in, where if once you deliver something on the nose, I feel like you have to keep explaining yourself, and you have to literally have the depth. Like you have to show it. You have to explain everything. Once you open that door of realism and on the nose, it's just it's an ecosystem that is completely foreign and just weird to me, and I don't want to live in that. And I think it just comes down to preference.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting too is that it's analogous to who we are as people. You know, we're so much of consciousness or being alive is about like what's going on in your subconscious or your unconscious, and so I think we like when we experience art and it feels like there's a subconscious in the art. And I think when something's on the nose, everything's visible. It's like all on the surface. But if we create art that like somehow there are pieces missing, or there are things that you don't see that you somehow feel, that's really a big part of it. That's what I'm really drawn to, and I think that's like it helps the art represent life, because like when you talk to somebody and it's a person that has some depth to them, you know that what they're saying isn't the whole picture, and you can kind of get a sense, oh, there's more to this person than just what they say. And I don't know, there's something about that when you feel that in art. It's cool. Like represents life more, I guess.
And that's the cool thing about this activity, is that it doesn't have to be art, and I guess it just is whatever you say it is, whatever you believe it is.
It's the sport of the arts, so you can have 60% sport, 40% art.
I just happened to be walking. I was at a band show the other day, and I just happened to be walking past the stadium on my way to the car, and a group took the field, and I think they were maybe 5 to 10 seconds into their show, and the crowd was going nuts, just on their feet. And I laughed, because my first thought, of course, was, oh, I could never do that. Like, there's no way I could write a show where the crowd would be going crazy in the first 5 to 10 seconds. And I was just laughing in my car, and I felt like really, like, I don't know, it was like this happy emotion. Like, that is so cool that this kind of marching arts world can affect people like that. most people don't even know that this thing exists, and it's cool that there's so much. I guess it's just like you could consider it like the pop world.
Mhm.
There's those bands and those songs and those artists and performers that really like they hit on the nose so accurately and well that it's just this concentrated entertainment, and it just endorphins. You know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
you have like the Radioheads and the whatnot that are approaching it like it's a different language.
Just because something's direct and simple doesn't mean it's easy.
I
But-
think that's a perfect way to say it. And I would even say it's not simple. Maybe the impact, the result is simple, but getting a crowd. I mean, if I said, okay, here's your challenge. I want you to write a show, and the crowd needs to be on their feet screaming 10 seconds into it.
Yeah, I mean, it matters what it is. Like,
Yeah,
it's
it's
the
huge.
difference between like minimalist art. I mean, it comes across, I guess, not simple, but I guess direct, and the right things happening at the right time, and everything that's supposed to be gotten from it is there to be gotten. I will say that I'll put an opinion down about it, which is just that I think that stuff that hits you really big right away tends to also wear off quicker. You know, I would make like a food analogy and say like some things are candy and some things are very
Right.
detailed, like, ooh, what's going on in this complex taste, you know? And it's like, but sometimes you really want candy and you don't want that like complex thing.
No, I totally agree, and I think no one would ever say, well, candy shouldn't exist then.
Right.
And I think that's the part I think is so cool about what we do in the marching arts side of things, is that there's room for everyone. There's room for every approach, and it makes it way more entertaining and interesting from a spectator standpoint. Like being a fan of the activity.
I
know?
want candy,
Yeah.
but not only candy, please. Next question. Here's one little curveball from at Becca Tikai. Any embarrassing or funny moments from practice or rehearsals that you can remember?
Nope.
Never been embarrassed. Nothing funny ever happens in Broken City.
Oh man. No specific event comes to mind.
Wait.
There's just I guess it's a general silliness to some of the personalities involved. It's different every year. It's
Have you ever been embarrassed in a rehearsal, like in a way?
well, let me think.
Because you're not somebody who's often embarrassed, but I think the potential is there.
No, I'm embarrassed more often than I'd like to be.
Have you ever been like telling something like having a serious talk with the battery, and you look down, your fly's down, anything like that?
No, I don't. No. I think I've lost my train of thought sometimes. I'm so inside my own head, and I'll be saying something, and then I just have this.
And then just blonk.
Well, I have this like zoom effect where all of a sudden I'm literally like looking out this lens at everything in front of me.
Oh.
And there's a self-conscious thing that happens.
So then you realize like,
that's
oh,
happened.
a bunch of people are looking at me.
Yeah.
And then your brain empties.
But I don't think to the point where
couldn't recover.
I outwardly show that.
Mm.
Like I don't think it's happened to where I start laughing or other people start laughing.
Right.
No, I'm pretty comfortable in a rehearsal environment. I think when I'm in
Embarrassing
the
or
zone,
funny?
yeah. So I tend to just. I mean, if something funny happens, it happens. I don't know if I've ever been embarrassed.
Yeah, and I would say the funny stuff is probably just like par for the course. So there's not anything you really
No, they're
stands out.
goofballs. They have to be goofballs. They're crazy to want to beat
Well, shoot.
themselves up for that.
Sorry, Becca. There's no like revelatory one. It's just super fun all the time and not embarrassing. All right. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one. Unique bonding techniques you guys do before rehearsals or competitions, and that's from at kayo.drum.cannot.
I mean, nothing. There's nothing.
Dude, I think your little Braveheart speeches before and after, when Mel Gibson's on the horse going back and
I don't
forth.
have any Braveheart speeches.
Well,
Everything.
You're not wearing the war paint and
no. In fact, I actually don't. I'm not really a big fan of that.
Well, that's why I like them, because like they're understated and they're like, or maybe you don't see it because it's you and whatever. But I just like the fact that when this is what I enjoy actually about being in church, and when somebody breaks it down and goes, "Hey, we're gonna pray right now." Usually I'm like, "Oh, well, this is like kind of weird." Like I have sort of like a reaction of like, this is awkward because we're like, there's 10 people here and somebody just wants to pray, so now we're gonna all be quiet and like, like I always wonder like who's gonna open their eyes and look around, like what's the deal? But then when you feel somebody who really is just like, no, they totally owning it, and you feel that their prayer is like sincere. There are times when there's like a little warm fuzzy that comes over me, and I'll just be like, wow, this is what this group of people needed, is somebody to like pull up what's underneath the surface and like get us out of a mode of surface level, like get us out of that mode of being funny. And because Broken City does have like when I come and visit, it does seem fun, but it's also serious. But when you like bring people together and just say what's on your mind, everybody kind of remembers like, oh yeah, we're taking this seriously. This show has some meaning. I think it's nice.
There's moments where I just detect that everybody's caught up in the nuts and bolts, and I want them to zoom out a little bit. So it's not a contrived thing that I do. There's no ritual that I do.
You talk to everybody before every comp though?
Yeah, but sometimes it's just like I'll literally just say, "Hey, bring it in. All right, don't mess it up," and then that's it.
Yeah, so you're
and it's done tongue in cheek. Like they know I'm kidding. Like.
But it changes based on the vibe you're getting from them that day, right?
Right. And then sometimes I want them to zoom out. Like I feel like they're just too inside, like that left hand and this flam and this this direction change. And I want them to go, hey, like none of that matters. What matters is that I believe you. When I'm sitting in the stands, I need to look out on the floor. I want to believe you.
So I think if I were to translate, not that you need translation, but they said like unique bonding techniques, and I would say like it's unique to, it's probably a skill that you've built up either consciously or unconsciously throughout the years of like getting a vibe for the collective consciousness of the group. Like, is everybody too technically focused? Are they not focused enough on that? Or what's going to be the best and shortest little thing that I can do that's going to make the biggest impact? Sometimes it's a slight tongue-in-cheek, semi-sarcastic, don't screw up. And everybody goes like, oh yeah, okay, I need to focus. Or it's something a little bit more, whatever the opposite of that, maybe they need to loosen up. So that, I think that's a cool bonding, even though it's not deliberately bonding. Yeah. It's not like, put your hands in the center and everybody like, woo, Broken City.
And if you do happen to see them doing that, it's something that they do as membership. The staff's not involved in that. But the one thing I just came to me while you were talking is that I say the most important thing we do is talk afterwards. We meet at the truck, and we do have a routine that we talk about it.
That's actually what I remember the most too. Yeah. Actually, come to think of it.
Yeah. So that part is pretty special because it allows like the pressure's off, and we can talk about, hey, why didn't that mic cable work, and what happened to the chain, came off the reel again. But we can also talk about, how did that feel? And like you guys really took that, those 2 days of rehearsal, and we saw it. We saw the progress, and we saw the achievement happen, and it was believable. Hopefully that's the response.
Yeah.
And then we prepare ourselves for the next week, because we typically have 5 days where we won't see each other, 5 to 6 days where we won't see each other again.
Yeah.
Once we leave that circle.
And for those of you out there listening to, like, my relationship to the group is very come and go, like I'm not there a lot. And it's an interesting creative relationship. So in a lot of ways, like I'm like a fan of the group, and I don't really know a ton of the nuts and bolts of, especially of rehearsals and whatever. So when I see these things, I feel like I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out, kind of like, oh, how does this function? You know? So, and it's been a long time since I've been in your group. I mean, it's been since the 90s, but one of the things I noticed and that really has stuck with me from actually going from being your student to being your friend, to being your collaborator and friend, is that you're you're honest. Like I don't know if I ever see you encourage for the sake of encouragement, which it's hard. Like I'm definitely somebody who I put in the forefront of my mind, like encouragement is something that is kind of like just do it as much as you can, or at least that's what I attempt to do, is like make sure you pepper that in. Like even if I'm like pissed or something, I'll be like, well, I gotta add this. But I get the sense that you're like, no, if there's nothing encouraging to say, I'm only going to critique today and let that stand, which is, I think, admirable. I think it's a cool trait.
It's
I'm not saying you're a jerk. I'm just saying
no. It's because I consider that like definitely one of the a weakness, or at least a part of myself that I am working on. It's like a work in progress where
I think people who do that garner respect because they don't just throw out like niceties.
Yeah. At the same time, though, it can spiral into an emotional response, which
it feels
9 times out of 10 is regrettable.
What, it feels like negative, or when you're doing it?
I guess I'm in right now. I'm just putting this in the context of I always want to be like unclouded, basically, and the second that I'm not feeling something, it's got to be, I want to make rational and logical decisions, and especially what comes out of my mouth next.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by not feeling?
I don't want to make decisions or say things in an emotional state.
Oh, yeah.
So,
but inevitably,
I think it manifests itself into me being, you called it honest, but
I guess just authentic. You know, letting your emotions come out in your speech.
But what I am working on, what I would like to do more of is to, maybe those things just don't bother me, and I'm still authentic, but I'm just not so bothered by those little things, because the more time goes on, the more you find that those things didn't matter anyway. Why was I so worried about it?
You know, here's a little offshoot, because I remember we've had this discussion before, and it'd be interesting to just sort of share the idea. I don't know how many of you out there are aware of, I guess it's being called the intellectual dark web, but it's a group of people, Brett Weinstein and Joe Rogan's a part of it, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, handful of people that you can find on the internet and on YouTube videos talking about philosophy, religion, consciousness, all this kind of stuff. And it's interesting because I'd say you and I are both, you know, respect and are fans of Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, but they're sort of on other sides of the fence, I guess. They have debates. And one of the things you always say about Sam Harris is like, I wish I could be that calm or like composed or unemotional or whatever. And one of the things that I love about Jordan Peterson is that he's very intense and passionate, and he can get angry and sort of, you know, he's got a bit of a temper, but it doesn't really, at least in my opinion, it doesn't really affect the quality of what he says, but it definitely affects the delivery. It affects what he says, but not the quality of it. It's not like he goes on angry rants and then has to like back up and go like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. I didn't mean it.
Right.
It's more that he gets more precise, but it gets intense. And a lot of people, like in one debate, somebody called him a mean white man, you know? So like, but it'd be interesting to hear you talk about that, what you admire about Sam Harris, because it sounds like it's what you're talking about. That ability to sort of rise above your emotional state, right?
Yeah, just to back up a little bit, the thing that I enjoy about about those individuals, like all of them.
Mm.
I freely listen to all of them when I have time, and I don't have to agree with them. I don't have to take a side. I love the exchange, the authentic, honest exchange of ideas, and I love hearing the sometimes they're debates, sometimes they're just deep discussions, but
Right.
I love hearing that they're
more perceived as debates than they really are debates.
And I mean, it depends on who's talking. They can agree with each other or not, but I think it's just being more mindful. I know that's a little bit of a buzzword, mindfulness.
Yeah.
But I think something that I the concept I love to borrow, and something that Sam Harris has said, is it's not whether you get angry or whether you're upset or emotional. It's how long do you remain in that state.
Huh.
And I love the trying to wrap my head around that. Like, it's like, let's say you're angry for an hour, and how much damage could you do in an hour being angry? And now imagine
if you're texting, a lot.
if you're angry for 5 minutes, I would still submit that if you're angry for 5 minutes, you could do something that would be perpetually damaging, even for 5 minutes. So now let's say you're angry for 5 seconds, and now you're somewhat in control, and you're being mindful, and you can still experience that emotion, and you can still process it. You're just processing it.
That's
quicker.
enough time for like a jab, left hook.
And the idea is to get it down to, a few seconds, to where it's like deep breath, you're cool, you're over it, and you know that you will have a greater perspective, a more macro, zoomed out.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too, because that translates in an expanded sense. For some reason, it came to my head is that, like, people who have a lot of baggage or who are carrying trauma, or and this is something that Jordan Peterson has talked about, and it's something that he has a thing called like self-authoring.com, and it's like it's tools for kind of dealing with your past, kind of outlining your present, and then planning for the future. And he talks about, if there's something that's over roughly a year and a half old that's still having a significant emotional impact on your life, it really needs to be dealt with. It's like, there are people who are like perpetually angry. I could imagine the worst thing, a loved one gets murdered. But if you don't have, that's why forgiveness is so powerful. Like, if you're not able to sort of let go of a negative or not a negative emotion, because anger isn't always negative, but there's self-righteous anger and there's whatever. You don't have to qualify it as good or bad. But I think if you're hanging on to anger for years and years and years and years, it's really hurting you even more than anybody else. And you're hurting everybody else. It's very poisonous. But it's interesting to look at it on the micro like that. Like, because definitely, when you're married, it's like there's that old adage, like, don't go to bed angry. And it's like, it's pretty valid, because when I've gone to bed angry, it's like it has a chance to sort of seep deeper in, and that's what causes, like, it can cause long-term resentment and stuff, and like that stuff is just poison. But then speaking and communicating when you're super mad or whatever is like, holy crap. It can be just as bad as, I guess, any extreme emotion. If you act on it, can really go either way, right? Like, if you're super, turned on or something, like, how many people have done crazy things when they're just super in that state? Or if you're manic and super happy, like, you'll do things that are more risky or whatever. I don't know. You're looking at me with a weird look. What is that?
No.
Am I on a tangent?
We're on an extreme tangent.
All right. Well, that's when you go to the next question. Anyways, bonding techniques that we did it. Okay. Here's one. Make this short. What's your personal favorite Audible? This is by @if.she.breathe.
this is one of the ones I read beforehand, and it just made me laugh because I'm not even sure what they're talking about.
They talking about
I have to assume it's one of those like behind the curtain that the performers are saying it on the floor without the knowledge of the audience. I mean, that isn't that what an audible would be?
was there an audible for the 2 rim shots, or is it a secret?
It's not a secret.
Was everybody using their internal clock?
Apparently, it wasn't. It wasn't sufficient enough for that second one. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. But audible, man. I mean, I don't know. The first thing that
did you just evade the question? Was there one?
No. What
were they dutting or anything?
Yeah, there's super secret,
Super
like
quiet.
covert duts
Okay.
back there. I mean, is that? I mean, even with the duts, it's still hard.
Oh,
A lot of
totally.
variables in there.
But it is an audible.
Dut is my favorite audible.
That's enough of an answer for me.
Well, no, I'll answer it because it actually doesn't relate to Broken City, and this is one of those things where I'm a bad storyteller, and it's going to be funny to me and maybe 2 other people.
Make it short then.
I'll make it really short. So yeah, back in Suncoast Sound, 1989, the tenors actually it was the snares yelled name, and the tenors yelled Rocky, and then the snares yelled occupation, and the tenors yelled I'm a squirrel.
We'll leave it at that.
That is my favorite audible.
That's a good one.
Jim Wunderlich, you remember that one.
Shout out. Okay, here's a quick one from @Manny.xi, which that means 11, doesn't it? Roman numerals. When the I is before the X, it's -10. It's like 9, right? I'm stupid. Double drum set making a comeback? Question mark. And the answer is not today.
Possibly.
Oh, boss.
No. Like 2019? No.
Okay.
2020 and beyond, everything's a possibility. Like, you know,
It all depends on who comes and what the inspiration is.
give me a call. You play drum set, and you got a buddy that plays drum set, and it's good.
Yeah.
All things good.
Yeah. Or maybe you're schizophrenic. We'll set up 2 kits for you. Okay. @Prince Lone Star with 2 R's. Where do you guys get inspiration for your shows? I should have read that first because we already answered it. No, we didn't. We actually kind of didn't answer that.
Everything. Life. I think
Wah, wah.
it's
We'll be specific.
it's hard to be specific on questions like that because I don't think that question can't. I mean, it's different. It's different every year. It's hard to know.
Okay, well, there's definitely, okay, let me ask, I'll put some specificity on it. There was the commitment when it became Broken City that all content was to come from inside our little triumvirate. Kevin, Mike, me.
Yeah.
So I guess we inspire each other. So like maybe we could talk a little bit about how that works. Because certain things, there's certain elements that have come from like conceptual stuff that you walk in with. Some things come from seeds of things, interpretations of my songs.
Yeah, right. Like there's been years where I listen to one of your songs. Sometimes it's something from way back archives, years old, and it'll just hit me. I'm like, man, let's blow this thing up. Let's unpack this song.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see what we can do with it. And sometimes that involves taking your vocal stems
Mm-hmm.
and using them independently of the music in the actual song, where Kevin would be composing.
Almost always it's that, except for maybe the riff in Mother Father.
Sure. So there's that method. And then sometimes it's conceptual. It's like, all right, and I reverse engineer that. So it'd be, I'm really feeling this, and then it's something that you relate to and that Kevin relates to, and we're all on the same page. And then I will go through the whole catalog of everything that all three of us have written to look for what hits on this and how can we manipulate it. Even if we don't end up using it, it's something that we can later, because you've done this in the past where you write something specific for Broken City
Right.
percussion. And I love when you do that because it's so proprietary. It's exactly what we're trying to do. It's exactly the voice that we want to create within the activity.
It's always a little scary for me too, actually, because the fear is it won't be used or
Well, it's made like some of my favorite moments are those moments where we send you a video of what we're actually doing on the floor. And it's like, most of the time we don't give you any direction as far as what to say, how to say it, when to say it. It's just, here it is, and we're thinking this needs something, and here's what we're trying to say visually. Like, we are trying to portray this conflict or this struggle is happening on the floor. And then you run with it, and
break the show.
yeah, it did one year, but then we fixed it.
What happened?
Shout out to Tony Nunez for that one. He was an inspiration on us fixing it.
I don't remember what that was. But
well, we added vocals in a spot that didn't need it, and we broke the show. And then what happened was, we actually just made space for it. So it was one of the rare times where we got our cake and got to eat it too, where we got to do the thing that was so cool without vocals.
Yeah.
And then we created this hole for the vocals to exist. And we did a rare thing, and we rewrote all the visual, which is super hard to do. Like once you've moved beyond a certain movement, visually, it's hard to go back and rewrite everything because it just it's this linear thing, like rewriting dots and how are they going to get over there, and
right.
It's a logistic problem. So
you're dealing with space.
So it was one of those rare moments where we went back and we fixed it, and it was way better than the original version. So we got to keep both. We got to keep the awesome vocals. We got to keep the thing that we wanted to happen. And it was a cool moment.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of like, I don't know, chaos that goes down. And then it's sort of like problem solving within the conceptual framework that ends up creating, I don't know, the moments that tend to work or something. It's almost like, I wouldn't go so far as to say that you sabotage things in order to get a result, but it's like your process. It's like, it's a very artful process of just kind of not, you're flying by the seat of your pants. I guess there's no, or at least very little template. It's like, okay, we got the template, let's fill it in. And that creates a lot of like, I sure hope this works out. Or like,
well, some of it is just an execution problem. Like with anything, if you have a piece of architecture, like you're looking at this layout, and it's like, okay, we need, this church needs a steeple. All right. Well, how did you get that steeple on there? And did you think that through? And did you ruin the whole line of the archway by putting the steeple where you put it and how you put it? And you know what I mean? So it's just it's an execution problem where, okay, yeah, it needs a steeple, but don't ruin the archway in the process. And I think that's the trick, is getting the execution right. Because there's a lot of great ideas out there with the whole activity. You look at it as a whole, like there's great ideas. It's just sometimes one particular group will nail the execution, and like you got to give it to them. It's like that's their year.
Yeah,
they nailed it.
Yeah, and just to kind of wrap it back up too. I mean, the first thing you said was life, and there's definitely like, seems like, I know for my own music, it's very rare. I mean, only maybe one or two times across 8 albums have I written something that's more of like a story, kind of from my imagination as opposed to from my personal experience. And even when it comes from the imagination, you plug in maybe multiple experiences into one thing. But it does seem like a pretty important thing to us collectively that we're connecting to it on a personal level, that it's not just some like idea, like a random thing. Like, oh, this year it's just going to be about Tesla going to Mars. Let's do a Mars show, and it's like kind of distant from our personal experience. It's usually we're like looking in, I guess.
Right.
Okay. Another question. This is like the question answering podcast.
I think that's probably the best way to put it. Look in, don't look out.
Yeah.
Huh.
A little bit of a motto, I guess. Let's see here. Oh, here's one. At TEVVETVL. Tevetl. Any possibility of having the percussion help record and release an original song with a Broken City artist, going off the vibes of incorporating me and Irusi, Adam Watts and Irusi, in your shows? Over to you.
We tried this once, didn't we? The Sonny?
Yeah,
Sonny video?
Yeah, there's an artist named Sanni, SANNI, who I was working with a lot a few years back, and his stuff's like very fun, pop, kind of funk, slightly throwback. And this company had approached, I don't even remember where we met them, but they were
360?
It was the 360 video thing. It was like kind of about to come out, and they had created a way of combining GoPros together, like 8 of them or something. And he thought it'd be a cool idea to like integrate Broken City and playing all around in a 360 environment, like out in nature with Sonny singing and dancing.
Should
it's out there.
Put a link in the podcast for that. So
yeah,
grab that.
That's cool. Yes, but I think if you Google Sonny, the song is called Just Like That. It's also on iTunes, I believe, Spotify, and Broken City. You'll probably find it on YouTube, but I'll get a link too. But that's the closest we've come to it. And it's weird. It doesn't seem like there's not a lot of energy in things going that backwards in that other direction.
Yeah. I mean, I think anything's possible. I'm open to it. It's just the access to the membership is so seasonal. And even if you were to collect a portion of the membership, a lot of them are marching drum corps over the summer and they're unavailable. So it would have to be, I would assume it would be more geared towards age outs and alumni that would like to participate.
Yeah, logistically it'd be hard, but also I think when I think, using those instruments and that aesthetic in the world of, let's just say, my own music, I instantly think, oh, that's been done. Like I think of that huge Gwen Stefani song that was really based on
it's
that.
Like a novelty. And
it feels like a novelty, and I wouldn't want to put that in a novelty type context. Unless someday I had an idea where it seemed novel in a good way. But I have a segment that I've invented for this new stage of the podcast, this new like reinvigoration of it.
Okay.
And it's called Stupid Questions. What would be the worst animal to attack you to death?
I was going to say aardvark. I just went straight to aardvark. And I don't know why. I just trying to picture him going for my jugular or something.
I guess it's humiliating. Yeah, that would, just to be known as the guy who was killed by an aardvark.
Yeah, I don't want to go down that way.
And I lean towards, I asked my dad this question also, but he said Ebola. He went like micro. But yeah, I would think
clever
snake bite or something where you just have to be like sick until you die, kind of. I'm gonna make this even further. So, stupid questions. Is it important to you to have fun making music? How important is fun?
The fun is happens at some point. So yes, but here's the context.
So suffering.
The fun does not have to happen right away. It doesn't have to happen during the composition. It doesn't have to happen during the learning process. It has to happen somewhere. And also the fun doesn't have to be a local event. It can be
Local? You mean within you?
like
Or do you mean in your city?
the fun doesn't have to occupy space and time. Like the fun can be the abstract of the whole process. So it's a little bit of a
So memory.
yeah, or even just the fact that just I mean we all need something to do, right? So what do you want to do? You want to flip burgers for 8 hours a day, and it's like the fun is that like holy crap, I get to do this for like this is my job.
So it's
So
not.
it's I can have pain and suffering, and I can have bad days, but I can still look back and go, like, damn,
So
like, this is fun. Look what I get to do.
Is it a combination of delayed gratification mixed with the sort of reminiscing quality that was worth it, and like you can sit there and kind of go like, man, that wasn't always really what we're doing here is like trying to figure out what fun means. Like, what's the definition?
I guess
It's kind of like, do you believe in God? It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Well, the
what's the definition of those words? So, but I like your definition because a lot of times you talk to people, or I hear people talk. Like I watched this show on Navy SEALs training, and it'll be the hardest time. And if you asked any one of them, "Are you having fun during it?" the answer would probably be no. But at the end of it, you look back, that was like the greatest time of my life. Like when you suffered and got something out of it. It's like in retrospect, there's some value there that maybe falls under the category of fun, I guess. Or I know what it is. It's meaningful, and I think that's. If I'm going to answer my own question, I'm going to hijack it really quick. I would say that for me, fun is meaningful, and that I have a hard time having just plain old fun. Although now that I've had a kid, I've learned more how to have fun, but I like meaningful a lot. That's meaningful is fun.
I think when you're
Worth it.
in control of your day, it's an abstract fun. It's not necessarily fun, and that doesn't mean you don't have responsibilities and you have places you have to be, and you have things you have to do, and you have deadlines and whatnot. But ultimately, if you zoom out far enough, don't you have control over your day? And that's the part that's fun to me. Like I don't necessarily
That's
have
true.
control over, when that camp date is, or when that rehearsal starts, or when that lesson begins. I don't have control over that.
So it's gratifying to have like a certain amount of autonomy.
Yeah, but I have control over, however far you want to zoom out. And this would apply, I think, to anybody. It's like, do you have to have that job? Do you have to live there? Do you have to drive that car? Do you really have to live in that city? Like, you can just keep going and going, and it's ultimately, hopefully you've made choices or are continuing to make choices that lead to more and more. I'm going to borrow a Jordan Peterson thing here. It's not the suffering, it's not the absence of suffering or trying to rid yourself of suffering or omit suffering completely. Is the suffering worth it?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like all those deadlines and responsibilities and things that we have to do that, even some unpleasant things, is it worth it? And then the answer is yes. Then I guess for the purpose of this answer, I'm calling that fun.
Yeah. It's like gratification. And gratification and meaning. And I like that. And when I think about, and done. I had something to add, but it flew out of my head, out the door.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one last final question for you.
All right.
Wrap this baby up. You have to choose, and it has to be the first thing that comes to your head. Your
Stay puft
favorite.
Marshmallow Man.
How'd you know? What's your favorite? What was the most gratifying show of the last 4 Broken City shows?
Oh, you can't ask me that.
No, dude, don't break the rules.
Oh, gratifying? Cage.
Boom.
Yeah. I mean, can I explain why? I just gonna leave it like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was trying to do one of those like, and then we ended the
Let's
podcast.
do a quick why, and then you can press stop.
Okay.
We just come off a season of not making finals. And we took a huge risk renaming the group. Didn't know if kids were going to show up to auditions. And meddled both SCPA and WGI, which was the warmth of the reception of just fans, the membership, and of course, at the end of the day, the judging community it just changed everything.
And speaking of fun, it was kind of fun to kind of see, to make that kind of change and have people go, where'd they come from? Wait a minute. What's going on? Like that little bit of confusion and sort of stuff was like, it was a little bit fun for me to watch and to know that the changing of the name was really not like contrived, or it just came through us kind of spending more time together as friends and talking about like philosophies surrounding creativity and things we were frustrated with the creative process or collaborations. And it just led to like, whoa, why don't we just make this a little more official? And then you're like, what if we did this? What if we brought this name of your production company over to Broken City? And then boom, boom, boom. And what's funny, a little side note, is that called the show Cage. And at one point you were going to use my song Cage from Hero in the Pain album. And then in the end didn't use anything from that song, but it became like the jumping off point in terms of a title or whatever. So sometimes it's just like bait and switch happens. It's weird, but it's a fun process.
Indeed.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll be doing this all the time, every week. Visit, we have Patreons going, which we really super appreciate your support. We want to keep bringing you guys this and hanging out with you weekly. What's yours, Jackson? Mike Jackson? Jackson Percussion?
Jackson Percussion, yeah.
Jackson Percussion, Patreon. Mine's Adam Watts. We're going to start one for the podcast so we can just bring you more of these and make time for it. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.